In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a Soleus Focused Calf Raise. Now, what we're saying here in terms of the focus of the calf raise is typically we perform calf raises with a very straight leg. And when we raise up, we're primarily focusing on what would be the bigger muscle of the calf here, which is the gastrocnemius. And it is predominantly the mover into dorsiflexion of the ankle when we have a straight knee. But we might find that there's a weakness or a lack of awareness of the soleus muscle of the ankle. And the soleus muscle sits at the bottom here, kind of behind what would be the Achilles tendon, which runs and connects from the gastroc into the bottom of the ankle. The soleus muscle is more responsible for dorsiflexion when we've got a bent knee, this sort of deep degree of dorsiflexion. So when we have a bent knee, we're going to be focusing primarily on that area or that tissue, okay? So how we adjust that is we have to angle ourselves in terms of the position we find ourselves at with our calf raise. And we want to make sure that we're making a connection all the way from the feet, the underside of the foot, into the ankle and into the soleus. So how we'll end up doing that is we need to position ourselves potentially against the wall. I have the frame here in terms of my ability to sort of like spread my arms, which is very good, but I could do this against the wall as well, something that I can basically lean into. Because you can see from here, I'm going to be bending the knees and I want to get as deep a stretch position as I can into my soleus. So you can see from here, my ankle's pretty close to the floor, but I am at my end range, so I'm not going to be able to make connection to the floor, and I just keep sort of a slight bend in the knee. I've got my hands against the frame here, sort of driving myself back a little bit and adjusting as I see fit. And from here, I'm just going to keep that bend in the knee and I'm going to drive into the top of that calf raise, slowly control myself down. And it's really about loading as much as possible into the soleus when I come down into that bottom position. Okay, so when it comes to the drive, I want to continue the drive at the angle that I'm at with the body. I don't necessarily want to drive upward and straighten the knee. I want to drive towards the frame. So my knees stay in almost the same bent position. As I'm coming back then, I'm almost assisting the eccentric part of the rep. So the eccentric part is this lowering phase. I'm assisting it by sort of driving myself back. I'm applying more force to the calf to deal with, to the soleus to really deal with as it gets towards that end position. Another thing to consider is the angle at which the feet are at. So I'm just going to position myself so that you can sort of see from the back here. What I want to focus on is the degree, if you look at the right side here, the degree to which I'm dropping my ankle down and loading potentially more of the medial side of the ankle. This is, when we talk about this, this is the degree of tilting that we have at the ankle. So when we get into end range dorsiflexion, which is that sort of ability of the knees to come towards the toes, we actually have to evert the ankle a little bit. That eversion allows us to load what would be sort of the arch of the foot. It allows us to load what would be this sort of medial side of the ankle joint and get into a much better position. Whereas when we're at the top of our calf raise in plantar flexion, it's the opposite. We're actually going to invert a little bit. So if you imagine the degree or the angle at which we're going at, I want you to think of a clock face. I want you to think of sort of driving the ankles in and they go out at a little bit of an angle. It's very slight. If you're thinking of it as a clock face, I want my heel to end up. This right heel here is going to end up in what would be considered 7 o'clock on the clock face, and it's going to drive towards 1 o'clock on the clock face. And then it's going to be the opposite for this left side. My left ankle is going to drop towards 5 o'clock on the clock face as opposed to straight down into 6. And then I'm going to drive up to 11 o'clock as opposed to 12. Okay? Super slight. It's not massively different. You can see from here, it's very subtle, but it's just a slight difference in terms of the angle at where I'm going at as opposed to straight up and down. So a few little adjustments to play around with there, but you're just making sure to some degree that you're at that angle. You're not, as I said, driving straight up where your hips are sort of driving and your head is driving upward. You're driving towards the frame. Then as you come down, you're lowering eccentrically, pushing yourself almost back in to the soleus, really trying to drop the heel towards the floor and load that tissue near its end range. Certainly going to advance this in time, but for the moment we just want to test run and see what you're like loading the two at the same time. If we advance it, we're going to probably advance it onto a single leg option or even an assisted option as well. Okay, but if you have a few questions on that, be sure to let me know in the comment section below. If you liked it, like the video, share it with someone if you think they're going to find value from it. If you want to see more videos like this in the future where we break movements down into a little bit more detail, the nuances of each movement in terms of how the angle, the joints should be angled and stuff like that, then be sure to subscribe to the page. But for the moment, folks, I'll see you soon.